Welcome back, everyone. In this video, we're going to break down this warning, which says that each child in a list should have a unique key property. What does this mean? A key property is just a property on the actual, you can see it as a template or you can see it as the element HTML that we're returning from our map. In this particular case, it's the H1. React's just saying, hey, I want you to give me a key property, which is some unique string value, or it could be an integer. It doesn't matter. React is going to turn into a string either way. So here, if we know that, let's say, for example, our names are currently unique, then we could pass it a name value. This will work in our current context, but you can imagine that there might be a case where if we had 1,000 people, one of these names might overlap. We might have two different monsters named Frank. If that's the case, well, then this is no longer unique. So what we need to do is actually use a unique value. And most of the time, a unique value is going to be an ID. So in most projects, in most APIs, in almost everything where you're getting some kind of data, they'll have an ID value, which is some kind of string. That's like very complicated. And usually it's extremely complicated in a way that no two of these strings is identical, making them completely unique. And this is what we're going to use inside of our key value. So instead of monster.name, we're going to say monster.id. So you might be wondering, well, Yihua, why do we need this key value? This again goes back to React and re-rendering. This key value is actually something that React uses in order to make it more optimized when it comes to updating and re-rendering components on your page. On this page, we now have one app component, yes, but we have 4 different H1s that React has rendered onto the page for us. If we inspect, what we see is that inside of our app, which is the div, which is our component, we have these 4 H1s. But React will actually update this DOM directly, as we've seen before when we, let's say, add more to our components. In this particular case, how does React actually differentiate Linda from Frank, from Jackie, from Andre, these different H1s? The only way it can do it is by using the key value. And why is that important, you might be asking? Well, let's say, for example, what we did is we updated the name of Jackie to something else, like Yihua, for example. When React does that mean that React should now re-render every single H1 in this entire list? Or should it just re-render Jackie so that now it says Yihua? In order for React to do that, it needs to be able to properly differentiate these different components from each other. Because as I mentioned, these components are all using the same template. So how does React actually differentiate them and know that when Jackie got updated to Yihua, only Jackie needs to be up to date? Well, it uses that key value, that unique key value that associates that component to that bit of data. That is the purpose of the key. So we'll talk more about this when we start building a more verbose website. But for now, that's why whenever you use .map and you map out a list of HTML elements, you want to make sure that the top level, the very highest one, so let's say if this H1, actually, let's make this a div. And inside of this div, we have an H1. We want to make sure that at the highest level of this element, which is the div, that we add this key. And now if we go back, we'll see that each of these are divs with the H1s. You might be wondering, well, I added the key, but why is it not showing up inside of the elements? Well, this is actually something unique for React. React is going to be the only thing that needs that key value. The regular HTML, when it actually gets built, doesn't need the key value. So React takes it off. But it knows under the hood, it's keeping track of this key. And using this key, again, it's able to be much more performant and efficient when it comes to differentiating these components from each other and then figuring out which ones to re-render appropriately when their values update. That's the whole point of the key. So now that we understand this key, let's now move our application towards something that's much more typical of what we would expect. Instead of hard coding this array of monsters, let's fetch it from an API somewhere. In the next video, before we talk about that, I'm going to talk about some of the higher concept of why that's important when it comes to React and single page applications. So I'll see you in the next video.